On our Wednesday episode of Locked On Raptors, we dig deep into the semantics of failure versus disappointment, that and other things related to Canada's less than stellar run at the Olympics and the men's and women's tournaments. And we're going to do it all with our pal Oren Weisfeld, our chief Canada basketball correspondent.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome to another episode of Locked On Raptors, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Wednesday, August the 14th, and I'm your host, Sean Woodley. Been covering the Toronto Raptors now for 10 seasons on various platforms. You can find all my work over on the Hell website at Woodley Sean. You can find the show on Instagram at Locked On Raptors, and of course, you can join us in the Locked On Raptors Discord server, a great place to come hang out, talk off-season stuff, talk movies, talk food, whatever it is. You can talk about it with the sickos just like you who love the podcast and want to hang out with other sickos who love the podcast. It's free to join. Link in the description of the podcast. As always, we'd love to see you become part of our listener family over on the Discord. Of course, you can find the show for free on your favorite podcast app of choice on the audio side of things. Follow, subscribe, rate, review, tell a friend, etc., etc. Help us go up those charts. It strokes my ego. It makes me feel good. You can also go to YouTube, subscribe to the Locked On Raptors YouTube channel. When you do that, hit the notification bell button, and you will get a push notification to your device every single time the show goes live or premieres. It's a wonderful thing. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. And as the summer sports schedule gets a little bit light here with the Olympics behind us, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And we will get started here, welcoming in our chief Canada basketball correspondent. He's working on a book about Canada basketball. Did not get the storybook ending that I'm guessing he was hoping for this book from the Olympics. It is, of course, Oren Weisfeld. As a book writer, Oren, how does this Olympic result have you feeling?
Yeah, definitely not the storybook ending, like you said, but at the same time, I'm lucky because the book isn't just about Canada basketball. It's a much more broad Canadian basketball touch points, kind of grassroots stuff. So luckily, I didn't just focus on this men's team. Otherwise, yeah, it would have been pretty heartbroken, given the ending. But yeah, the book, I'm not too worried about it. It's gonna be fine, given just like I know we'll talk about this stuff, but we've come a long way. We didn't win a medal at this Olympics, but Canadian basketball has still come a very long way to be even in the position to potentially win a medal and to where fans thought they were going to win a medal. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, having expectation is nice, and not just sort of those expectations being the worst possible outcome. Also very nice. And yeah, I mean, the book's in your hands, so it's going to be fantastic. Still can't wait to get my hands on that bad boy whenever it does come out. But yeah, let's dive in. Today, we're going to sort of put a bow on the Paris 2024 games from the men's and women's side of things. Obviously, the women had a really tough turn, 0-3 in their group. Two medalists in their group, worth noting, I suppose. They were in the real group of death, as it turns out. And so we'll talk a little about that. The men's team, of course, falling in the quarterfinals to France and the power that is Gershon Yabusele and Matthias Lesor. Sort of look ahead to 2028 Los Angeles. Final takeaways on the tournament as a whole. We'll probably get into that banger of a semifinal between the States and Serbia on the men's side and all of that. It was a really good tournament overall. Super entertaining basketball. I guess from the Canada perspective here, Oren, sort of broad, big takeaways. What are you left thinking about here now, a couple days removed from the Olympic tournament, now about a week or so since Canada went out on both the men's and women's sides? Sort of what are your overall sort of prevailing takeaways from this tournament?
Yeah, I think it was definitely disappointing when you look at the whole picture of Canada basketball and you say, they had three teams there. They kind of projected that we could win three medals here. That was the talking point. The 3-on-3 team was ranked number one in the world at various points in the season. And for none of those teams to medal, that's definitely a disappointment. And there's no real way around that. I have pushed back on the idea that specifically the men's team was a failure. And I think that goes to the broader point of, what are the takeaways? The takeaway is that, like, this was the best international basketball tournament of all time. The men's team put themselves in a position where they could have medaled, but so did, 6 other teams. Like, it was just one of those things where everything was going to have to go your way to medal. But I think just being in that position where you have the potential to medal if everything goes right, that's a really good starting point for the men's
Mhm.
program. And obviously the 3-on-3 program is there too. And the women's program I think will be there in 28. They had a really disappointing Olympics, but overall, it's like Canada basketball is getting better, and we're doing these things to put ourselves in a really good position. But so is France, so is Germany, so is Serbia, and that's kind of the takeaway. I think is the world is all catching up to the United States.
Yeah, there's only so much you can do about what everyone else is doing, right? Like, I think Canada has taken the proper steps to, I think, right the wrongs of maybe the sort of 2015 through 2020 sort of era of the men's national team in particular. And, obviously the bronze medal in the FIBA World Cup last summer is still a massive achievement. That can't be sort of washed away because of a
Mhm.
quarterfinal loss to a couple of French guys having out of body experiences. Like I think that's all part of the sort of turning. Jordie Fernandez being around for a couple cycles now. Nick Nurse, obviously. The ending was weird, but the sort of there was clear progress made under him. And yeah, I think for me, I agree. This wasn't like some kind of massive failure for them, and they went 3-0 in the toughest group, right? Like that on its own is a good thing. And yeah, maybe they sort of left some point differential on the table that could have turned the tide later in the tournament with, the Greece game where it kind of slipped late or the Spain game. But overall, I think you'd have to be happy with the performances in those group stage games. And yeah, you lose to the host nation that with a crowd that's going absolutely bonkers with some guys who are sort of tailored to pick at the weak spots on your own roster, a roster that, outside of, a couple of guys who for normal reasons, understandable reasons couldn't be there, was basically the best roster you could have assembled. I don't think you can get too mad about that. It certainly
Mhm.
is disappointing, but it's not some grand failure of the program or anything like that. And there's lots to build on going into 2028. I guess for you, was there, anyone in particular who kind of popped, anyone who maybe surprised you that gives you a little bit more sort of hope looking towards 2028? I think obviously Shea being as good as he is, figures to be in his prime still when 2028 rolls around, maybe not for 2032. So 2028 might be that real medal opportunity with a guy of his caliber kind of running the ship. But was there anyone else, men's or women's sides, that kind of gave you like extra optimism that maybe you didn't even have coming in to the 2024 tournament about what lies ahead 4 years from now in LA?
Yeah, I think on the men's side, he's been talked about, but RJ Barrett, I don't think we
Yeah.
can underestimate what he did. It's really, really hard to be that efficient in that role.
Mhm.
And at his age, one of the youngest kids on the team, really. Um,
Crazy. It breaks my brain. He's been
yeah,
around forever.
yeah, and so I thought what RJ did was really impressive. He didn't have a single bad game. He was just steady, and I think that's really a credit to where his career is at. He's consistent, and that's kind of what you want. I think the problem is I struggle to find names outside of RJ and Shea, and that's kind
Sure.
of why this team is in this position that it is. I think we are probably what happened was they overachieved a bit in the group stage. France underachieved a bit in the group stage. So the expectations kind of ratcheted up and they lost. But when you actually look at what happened in the overall tournament, like the kind of level of FIBA talent that we have, and I mean not NBA talent, but specifically like FIBA talent, it's not where I think Canada thinks it is.
Sure.
Lou Dort struggled offensively in this tournament. Dylan Brooks struggled offensively in this tournament. Dwight Powell, Kelly Olynyk, the whole bench, all these guys who didn't play last year, like Lyles and Nemhard and Murray, these guys all really struggled to find their rhythm. So I think, yeah, we have a lot of talent in the country, but these guys need more FIBA reps.
Mhm.
And that's, I think, why there weren't a whole lot of guys who jumped off the page on the men's side. And on the women's side, it's also really hard to say anyone who impressed me because that was like an alarmingly bad showing top to bottom. They went 0
Mhm.
and 3. It's different, right? Like the women really, it's not like they had this 3-0 run and then like they were just bad the whole tournament through.
Yeah, like the offense in particular just totally stuck in mud for long stretches in every one of their games. And they had like in each game a disaster quarter that kind of undid everything for them. It was a tough scene. I mean, obviously, very young core of that team that we talked about when you were on this podcast last before the Olympics started. That figures to be a little bit more sort of in their prime come 2028. Aaliyah Edwards, I thought, showed some promise here and there. More so on the defense rebounding side of things than on offense. But I think they looked at their best when she was out there for stretches. Silas Swords, we know, is on the way. Like it's going to round into form a little more. This was like even more so than I think we expected. You could kind of see the sort of transition of eras with this team, and maybe not terribly surprising that they were unable to kind of get anything going against the teams they had in their group, which ended up being a very strong group. We're going to come back on the other side, Oren, continue to get into what comes next for the men's and women's teams, talk about some broader takeaways, and then we got to talk about the other basketball that happened, because that tournament rocked, and there was a lot of really fun stuff that went down, even though the upset we were all hoping of someone taking down the USA did not transpire. The way the States won, pretty darn cool. We'll get into all that coming up in just one sec. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, the single best place to go and wager on sports if that's the kind of thing you're into. And yeah, in the summertime, it's a little bit lighter. The Olympics are done, but the WNBA season's kicking back up. You've got baseball getting into the home stretch as well. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. hitting home runs every freaking day. If you want to go throw some money down on an anytime home run for Vlad, now is the time to do it. And FanDuel is making it fun all summer long, hooking up customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer at FanDuel. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. Maybe you want to throw some futures bets down. All right. The NBA season's around the corner. The NHL season's coming up soon. NFL football kicks off in a couple of weeks. And when I said NFL football, I think it hints at I don't really watch much football, but I know it's coming and I know people like to wager on it. And so if that's your thing, go find the lines you want to throw some money down on over at FanDuel right now. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball and of the Locked On Podcast Network. Go check them out, FanDuel.com. Back at it here with Oren Weisfeld, digging into Canada's performance at the I almost said World Cup, the Olympics, damn it. I'm having Olympics withdrawal. It's making me sad. But yeah, let's kind of keep on diving in here. I want to go back a little bit to the men's side of things and sort of what led us to this point. I think there was sort of one of the sort of takes coming out of that loss to France was they looked spooked, right? They looked like they just kind of weren't ready for that moment in that elimination game against the host nation. All sorts of allusions to Toronto Raptors games one of yore. I think for me, that was it wasn't so much about this team, right? It was like, to me, that felt like the result of the failures of previous iterations of getting to the Olympics, right? Like it's their first time in the Olympics. Well, it shouldn't have been their first time in the Olympics for a lot of these guys, right? Like this should have been their second or third turn in some cases. Is that a fair criticism? Like, is it silly of me to still be sort of ruining the losses to Venezuela and the Czech Republic in important games from years ago that I'm clearly definitely healed from?
No, I think that's a fair criticism. Like, if you look at international basketball, you have to go through your losses to come out on top, unless you're the United States. Like every other country, that has been the formula to success, is to go into these tournaments with a young core group, take your losses, figure out how to win, and then when these guys are closer to their prime, succeed. A lot of people thought they could skip a step because they are so talented and because they had been so close so many times. They thought that Canada could skip a step and just kind of medal in their first Olympics because they did have enough talent to, and it turned out that it wasn't true. Like you said, they got spooked, and the first quarter of that game, there's no way around it. Like they were just nervous and not ready for that crowd and not ready for the physicality, and the refs got to them, and it was an immature showing. So I think it's a good point. Like they should have been there in 2016. They should have been there in 2021. The program, didn't do things as well as they could have, and as a result, they didn't get there in those years. And I think, like you said, they kind of faced the problems or the backlash this year. But if that's kind of what you believe in, 2028 should be the time that this team
Mhm.
actually has a chance to really medal, because now they've taken their losses. Now they know what it's like. And now, by the time they get there, they should actually be one of the more experienced teams there as opposed to one of the least.
For sure, and another World Cup certainly won't hurt between now and then as well. I guess sort of plotting it ahead to 2028. We've talked about the sort of the talent that's going to be there, the women's side, the men's side. Obviously, you hope that like a Zach Edey can come along in his NBA career and be available. I think having someone of his size and physicality would have been real nice up against France, but
Mhm.
obviously was not meant to be this summer. As far as the program goes, I'm curious. You're way more dialed into this stuff than I am. Michael Bartlett, the head honcho of Canada Basketball, spoke with Michael Grange over at Sportsnet this week. And go read that Q&A. I think there was like a twinge of optimism there. Yes, disappointment at the results of the Olympics, but still plenty of reason to feel good about where things are going with the program. And I think that's fair. I think things are way better now than they were, say, 4 years ago, and that's a credit to the sort of changes they've made, the commitments they got from guys, et cetera, et cetera. But Jordie Fernandez, coach of the men's team, seems to have done a pretty decent job, though I think he kind of got out coached in that France game, and I think that's a pretty widely held sentiment and a fair one. He's going into his job with the Nets, and who knows what lies ahead there. It seemed like Nick Nurse was going to stick around with Canada Basketball too, and then the Sixers kind of seemingly squashed that. Mutual from both ends, whatever. But like, what do you envision for the sort of leadership of the program over the next few years? Seems like it's going to take a while for any decisions to be made here. Michael Bartlett said, like, just kind of taking a month to decompress, sort of live in it a little bit, and then kind of reach out to Jordie Fernandez and Victor Lapena about their roles as coaches for the teams going forward. There's, I think, plenty of decision making and conversations to be had, but I'm curious what you expect to be the sort of course of the leadership of Canada Basketball, the men's and women's side, going into 2028.
Yeah, I think the best programs in the world have continuity.
Mm-hmm.
Spain, Sergio Scariolo has been there for over a decade. Serbia, Pesic has been there forever, their head coach, and so have the core group of players. So if in 2028 we get there and Jordie is still the head coach and Shea and this group of players is still playing, I think that's a sign that Canada's in really, really good shape. If we get there and there's been a bunch more turnover, then something probably went wrong. And I think the program's smart enough to know that. So I would say
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of what I expect. Jordie's contract is over this summer, so they'll have to find a way to re-sign him. They'll have to get money from somewhere to re-sign him. But I would say, like, if the program wants it bad enough, they can. Nick Nurse,
Mm-hmm.
same way in 2019, they had to get, a donation from Danny Rice, who's the guy at um the Canada Goose CEO,
Sure,
right?
sure.
Like, there is money in Canada, you have to find it if you want it enough. So I think, yeah, Jordie had a bad game, but overall he's shown enough, and the one thing you don't wanna do is break up the continuity that they have
Mm-hmm.
going there. Victor Lapena signed a contract extension before the Olympics until 27, which maybe Canada Basketball is questioning why they gave it to him right before the Olympics after what
Sure.
happened there. But,
Good agenting on Victor Lapena's agent part.
yeah. He also took a job in Turkey that now he's not gonna be the full-time head coach anymore of the women's team. He's gonna also be working in Turkey. So, I expect both coaches to be around at least for the immediate future. But what's gonna be interesting for me, the most interesting part is, like, what are the players' commitments looking like? Obviously, they
Mhm.
asked for a 3-year commitment this cycle. I don't expect them to do that again, to be honest, but I think if I was running the program, and I'm not, I would say if you don't play in 2027, which is in Qatar, and people don't wanna go to Qatar for obvious reasons, but tough
Right.
luck. If you don't play in 27, you're not playing in 28, because everyone wants to play in LA 28. But as we
Sure.
saw, to me, the biggest takeaway of this tournament was the guys who didn't play in the World Cup a year ago were worse off than the guys who did.
Yeah.
So that's same thing goes for the women's program.
Yeah, I mean, every bit of time spent playing with one another is valuable, even if it's separated by many months at a time. Like, you got to get that continuity somewhere and those reps somewhere.
Mhm.
And yeah, I think that's a pretty fair point by you. Yeah, I mean, the Jordie thing is interesting, right? I wonder if they are if it is helpful to them that the Nets are garbage and figure to be garbage for many years. Like, if they were like a contending team, I wonder if that might throw a wrench in their plans a little bit more. Just with deep playoff runs, we know what it means for players. Obviously, coaching too, I think it applies. And if Jordie Fernandez was walking into like an instant team that's expecting to play into May every year, maybe things are different here. But maybe they get the benefit of the Nets being the Nets, which would be lovely for all of us. Because I think Jordie Fernandez did a damn good job and kind of got the buy-in that has not really been there in previous iterations under sort of various rotating casts of coaches before him. We're gonna come back to the other side here, Oren, and just sort of sit in the tournament itself. It was great, as you mentioned, on the men's side, the single most talented tournament we've ever seen in the international stage. The women's tournament ended with an absolute banger of a gold medal game. Poor Gabby Williams with the Kevin Durant treatment, with just the foot being a little bit too big. We're gonna get into that and sort of put a bow on Paris 2024 as a whole in just 1 second. All right, continuing on here with Oren Weisfeld, just sitting in and digging into our takes on the Olympic tournament from Canada's perspective, and of course, from the global perspective as well, because it was a great showcase of some really rad basketball on both sides, men's and women's. Before we dive in a little further, just a reminder, Locked on NBA should be your second listen today, as lots of stuff still goes on in the NBA every day. Lauri Markkanen extensions last week. You've got, of course, Olympic talk, putting a bow on that tournament from our hosts over there at Locked In NBA. Go check it out. It's a great place to go and stay up to date with everything going on around the league every single day throughout the off season. All right, Oren, final takeaways on the tournament as a whole. Let's start with the men's side of things. The U.S. holding on against both France and Serbia. France never quite felt like it was in jeopardy the way it certainly did against Serbia. But both of those games, I think, to your earlier point of everyone getting better, a pretty great showcase of it's not just going to be a cakewalk for the States anymore as the international game gets better and all of these programs improve. I mean, France, you would figure it's only up from here with Wemby just sort of figuring out what Wemby is going to be. And oh my God, it's going to be terrifying. Half the draft every year seems to come out of France these days. Overall, though, like I think a pretty awesome showcase. And the fact that it was like the guys who have defined basketball for the last 15 years kind of banding together to take down these international powerhouses. As much as I was rooting for an upset over the States, pretty rad to watch it all go down.
Yeah, it really was fun. I was curious to see what would happen when a team pushed the States. Like, how would they handle being in a clutch situation, being down a little bit in the fourth quarter? And you have all these alphas who want the ball, who want to be the heroes, and who are used to having the ball at the end of the game. I was really curious, like, if that was actually going to hurt them. And it turned out that, like, no, they played those games perfectly. They found the hot hand. They are just like smart enough to know that, like, yeah, even though I could hit a shot at any time, I'm Kevin Durant, like, I'm gonna swing it back to Steph Curry because he just made 3 threes in a row. So it was impressive the way they executed down the stretch of those games. I was rooting for an upset, A, just because it's fun when the USA loses, and B, because it would have proven, selfishly, it would have proven a point that I was kind of making, which was like, anything can happen in these tournaments, and everyone's freaking out over Canada losing, and then France goes on to beat Germany, and then they almost beat USA, and Serbia almost beats USA, and it's just like, I know everyone thinks that talent should persevere, but it doesn't always work that way in these tournaments. Serbia was up for 40 or 39 minutes against USA. So yeah, it was just a really fun tournament, and I mean, Steph Curry just did Steph Curry things in the end.
So sometimes on this podcast, Oren, we play a game, and I'm excited to make you play it because you're such a low key dude. But it's a game called "What Sound Did You Make?" So sometimes when something cool happens, I'll ask the guest what sound they made when it's a real game about onomatopoeias. Really, what sound they made when a thing happened on the basketball court. The most recent one we played was with Katie regarding Ulrich Shamshe going coast to coast and having a nice, cool bounce pass in Summer League. And so for this one, I will ask you, and I will give my answer as well. what was the sound you made when Steph Curry hit that three over two dudes draped all over him in the gold medal game?
I was at the Nationals U17 Ontario versus BC watching on Liban Osman's cell phone. So when Steph Curry hit that three, I just like pushed his phone away and was disgusted. I don't think I made a sound because I was in a public setting. But
Right.
yeah, it was more just like it was one of those.
It's not bad. That's not bad. It's not great, but it's not
Yeah,
bad.
it's not.
Mine was more of a sort of like stunned horror, like a whoa. I make weird sounds when I watch basketball at home. My wife doesn't love it. I'll tell you that. Not her favorite thing about me. And I'm sure my neighbors don't love it either. But yeah, it was pretty ridiculous. That Serbia game, by the way, we should probably talk about that for a second. To
Mhm.
me, I'm having a hard time thinking of the last time a basketball game made me feel that nervous. Like it might be Raptors title run. It was just so intense and so like every possession felt like it carried the weight of the world. Are you with me on that? Like maybe the best basketball game of this decade in any setting?
100%. I was really nervous Canada, France, I'll say that too,
Mhm.
but the whole semifinal day, first it was France, Germany, that was a great game, and
Mhm.
then the Serbia game, and you're just kinda going into it like, "Please just be close," right?
Yeah.
Because USA had kinda blown out every team going into it, and then Serbia starts off just hitting every shot, and you're like, "Thank you, this is gonna be a close game." And man, that was one of the best games ever for sure. Like Jokic to me cemented himself as best player in the world.
Oh my god.
He got
Yeah.
that team a good shot pretty much every possession against some of the best defenders in the world. And like Anthony Davis, who's not a small guy, could not get on the floor because every time he did, Jokic just backed him into the post and basically got a foul on him. And Serbia just overall, you could just tell that team knew each other so well. They knew what they wanted to do so well. And yeah, you have to give them a lot of props, even though in the end they went cold. And then, talking about sounds, I don't know if I can swear on the pod, but when Kevin Durant hit the ISO to put that game away, I was just like, mother effer. Like it was too good to be true the whole game through.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Awesome. I was actually going to throw another. We got 3 rounds of what sound did you make? My other one was what sound did you make when Onyen Dobrich missed that wide open three off of the broken offensive rebound play?
I was swearing a lot down the stretch
Yeah,
when Serbia
yeah,
was missing shots because I thought they actually had that game in their
yeah.
hand. Um,
I think he hits that three, they win. I really do. I think,
yeah.
man,
I mean,
just
if
crushing
Steph
it.
doesn't go off in that game at the beginning, I think they win too, right? Like
Yeah,
Steph at the end of the day was the difference maker for Team USA for both of the medal games. And even though he didn't close out that game versus Serbia like he did against France, which was like an all-time heater, he kept them in it throughout, just also making ridiculous shots. It just wasn't at the end of the game. So, yeah, that was tough for Serbia, but they got their bronze and, like, they deserved a medal at that tournament.
no doubt. On the women's side of things, the final between France and the States was super compelling. Comes down to the Gabby Williams foot on the line, two at the buzzer. I was really happy to see a very close game featuring the States because I was a little bit worried we would
Yeah,
go through this entire tournament without them getting challenged. And frankly, like that's all you can hope for with the American women. They've won what 8 gold medals in a row now. They never ever lose. They've won 60 games in a row on the international stage.
yeah.
And I just wanted like one little flourish where that was in doubt. And man, oh man, did France do it. Gabby Williams was awesome. Marine Johannes was like kind of a mess in this game, and yet they still nearly pulled it out. Overall impressions of that final, because that was equally thrilling and almost as sort of like butthole clenchy for me as the Serbia USA men's game was.
Yeah, like, I didn't expect that, so I didn't even watch the first half because
Yeah.
you just expect the women at this point to win blowouts, and I don't think people realize if they had lost that game, it would've been a way bigger upset than if Serbia beat the men's team or anything like
Oh,
that, like
100%. Yeah.
but like you said, they haven't lost an Olympic game since 1992, the women's team. So, France, you know, I give a lot of credit to them. They played really well. I also just think USA didn't play very well, and it would have
Mhm.
been really interesting to see what happened if they lost, because inevitably questions about their guard play would have came, and they didn't take the best guards straight up. Like,
Sure.
they didn't take Caitlin Clark. They didn't take the Dallas Wings point guard whose name is slipping me right now. But people kind of said that when the roster came out. Diana Taurasi was a legacy pick. She didn't play really in that game at all, but it was just kind of like, again, it's Diana Taurasi, so you understand it. But if they had lost that game, the questions would have been really loud, especially Caitlin Clark, because she
Mhm.
would have really helped that team, I think. But they squeaked it out. Asia Wilson was amazing down the stretch of the game. Um, Kelsey Plum, I give her credit because I did not think
Totally.
she would be closing games for this team, and she ended up doing it. So, yeah, but that's the other kind of major winner or takeaway from this tournament is like French basketball. What a
Man.
tournament for them.
Mhm.
You know, this is a good way to close it off because we think that Canada was such a big disappointment, and it was, but look at what the French did for this tournament. They hosted it. They spent a ton of money to host it. And
Mhm.
and that's a huge advantage with the reffing and with the crowds. The other thing they did was like their WNBA players didn't play this year. They held them out basically to have an extended training camp
Mhm.
for the tournament. And the NBA players, they were in camp like 2 weeks before Canada was in camp. Like, they had an extremely long camp because it's in France. They didn't want to disappoint. They wanted to give themselves the best chance possible.
Mhm.
Like, the federation compared to a Canada has way more money. I don't think people realize how much European federations have. Like, we're talking
Mhm.
double the amount of money. So France, that's kind of the pathway, I think. You try to host a tournament best you can. You have as long as a training camp as possible. On the WNBA side, you try to even make it financially possible for the women not to play their WNBA season so that they can not join the team a week before an Olympic competition starts.
Mhm.
And you got to give France a lot of credit because they did all those things and they end up with 2 silver medals.
Yeah, pretty impressive stuff from France all around, all very well put by you. We'd be remiss, Oren, if we didn't wrap up by tying things back into the Toronto Raptors. We talked about the 2028 Olympics. Obviously, a lot of the guys who carried the day for this American team will likely not be playing in LA in 2028. I mean, I'm sure LeBron will be at age 44 because he's a freak, but everyone else will
Bronny
probably
will be.
be.
I know
Bronny
Bronny
will
will
be.
be there.
Bronny 100% will be there. Yes. So let me ask you, if we're 4 years out, I'll put you on the spot. We can go back and do the cold takes exposed thing. If or old takes exposed, cold takes exposed. I don't know what the hell the internet does these days with old takes, but either way, if we're still doing this podcast in 4 years, we can revisit. Does Scottie Barnes make the 2028 men's Olympic basketball roster? I haven't seen him in most of the sort of hypothetical rosters going forward, but I think that's maybe very wrong.
Oh, I agree. I mean, the hypothetical rosters are silly because it never works out the way people think 4
Yeah.
years from now. There's gonna be a bunch of kids who are in the league who are gonna make that team. There's gonna be a bunch of people who aren't all-stars right now who become them. So, the hypothetical rosters are completely irrelevant. I've never seen it happen until this year. Like, this year is just a crazy one, but
We
yeah,
need
I
that
think Scotty.
content, man. It's content season.
I know, but yeah, Scotty is being disrespected. Like, Cade is on all these lists for some reason, and Scotty's
Crazy.
not.
Yeah.
So it's a little Toronto Raptors disrespect, but we're used to it. We embrace it.
Yeah, I think there's a very good chance Scottie Barnes is there and a big part of the team. And
He would be a great FIBA player. He could play
right?
the 5, I think, in certain situations. Like, he would be a really fun FIBA player. He could hit more threes, I think, because of the shorter line. Yeah.
Hmm. Definitely more threes than Jason Tatum hit. Can't wait until he's taking Jason Tatum's minutes in 4 years from now. It's going to be delicious. We're going to leave it there. Oren, this was great, man. Thanks so much for hanging out, offering your wealth of expertise on Canada hoops. Anything you want to promote for the good people out there right now before we wrap things up?
No, same old. You can follow me on Twitter if you want to keep up with the book, which will be out about a year from now in 2025 at
Hell yeah.
Oren Weisfeld. Otherwise, thanks for having me. Yeah, really fun Olympic tournament. It lived up to all the hype, and I'm sure 28 is going to be a great one too. But unfortunately, for FIBA files like myself, we'll have to wait 4 more years.
Yeah, 3 more years to the World Cup. The World Cup, it's tons of fun. Either way, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much for hanging out today and listening to the show. We'll be back again tomorrow with Jamar Hines. We're going to dig into the Raptors bench and how it's all going to come together. Are they really just going to roll out a whole bunch of vets? They might. We'll get into that coming up tomorrow with our pal Jamar Hines. Go listen to yesterday's show. We talked about the rookies with Katie Heindel as well. That was a fun one. Talked about the BBQ trio, just kind of doing a big 10,000-foot view of the team over the last week or so. That BBQ episode was last Friday with our pal Big V. With that, we'll leave it there. Thanks so much. Support by following, subscribing, rating, reviewing, telling a friend. Much appreciated when you support the show. However you support the show, you're all the very, very best. Join the Discord, link in the description, free to do. And we'll talk to you again Thursday on another episode of Locked On Raptors. Thanks for hanging. Bye-bye. Terrible.